Good evening, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for being here, and I applaud you. First of all, this is the kickoff of our series for the congressional candidate roundtables, and we're delighted you're here. And you are brave, as is our candidate, John Decker, because I'm understanding the forecast is not necessarily a positive one. However, we're here. We're going to hear some very positive thoughts, I'm sure. I'm delighted to introduce you to Tim Waldron, who is our new chair of our Government Relations Committee for the Chamber of Commerce, and so we're delighted. He's sitting on our board, and he is representing young professionals, so we're thrilled about that. And we're delighted to have Tim here, and he's going to I'm turning over the program to Tim, who will introduce our speaker. So thank you.
Sure. All right. Why don't we, before we introduce John, let's introduce people around the room so we know who our audience is here.
All right, sure.
Millie, would you like to start?
I'm Millie Waldron, Registrar of Voters here in Torrington.
Donna Isley from Torrington.
I'm Wendy Traub. I'm the 65th District State Representative candidate for Torrington. I'm also the chairman of the Torrington Republican Council.
Ricky Campbell, registered citizen.
Ray Jaguar, retirement Whistling Group.
Lena DEA, small business owner.
I'm Slade from Torrington, Penn Creek.
Kevin Litton from the Republic of America.
I'm John Lavery from Sterling Engineering in Barkhamsted.
Fran Delaney from Torrington, West State Mechanical.
All right, so I'll give a brief biography of John here. John Decker grew up in the greater Washington, D.C., Maryland area, spent time visiting his father in Connecticut, New Hampshire while growing up. Upon graduation from the University of Oklahoma, he worked for State Farm Insurance, where he spent time on the catastrophe team, traveling to hurricane-hit areas and towns across the South of America. John has been a financial advisor for the last 16 years and has also earned his Certified Financial Planner designation. He has been active in his community, serving as treasurer and deacon at his local church and as a coach for youth sports. He serves on the board of the Mandel Greater Hartford Jewish Community Center and on the board of directors of Businesses for Downtown Hartford, an advocacy group that promotes and develops businesses and commerce in downtown Hartford. He resides in West Hartford with his wife Melinda and their 3 children. And I'll turn it over to you, John.
All right. That's who I am a little bit. You'll hear a lot more about me in a little bit. But first, I want to thank you for coming here, particularly those that came up in the media for following us up here, too. I'm really here for you. This is a great opportunity for me to introduce myself to you, both as, registered voters and as the media, because, I am kind of an unknown name. I have never run for political office, and actually that may be a very good thing in today's, climate right now. And I will tell you, actually, in a lot of ways, I think it's a shame that I have to do this. I never envisioned myself being a politician. I'm blessed in many ways with a wife and 3 young kids, as Tim said. I've been very active in the community. Again, a treasurer deacon of one of the largest churches in Hartford, on the board of directors for Mandel JCC, board of directors for Business for Downtown Hartford, and I love to coach youth sports, and that's just a few of the things I do. And running for public office is just something I never envisioned myself doing. But personally, I believe that there comes a time in your life that you have to speak up. And it's not just running for office, but anything in your life. When you know something's wrong or something's broken, you have to have the courage to step up and speak up about it. And despite the risk, because if it doesn't, nothing's going to change. Washington is broken. And as individuals, our politicians are failing us. And it's on both sides. It's not just the Democrats, and even though I'm a registered Republican. It's the Democrats and Republicans. They both spend our money. And we don't have the money. And they're enacting legislation that is really destroying small businesses and taking away the American dream of starting your own company. And that's what we got to correct. And so I can no longer sit back and watch our company ring up trillions and trillions of dollars. We're adding $1.3 trillion a year in our deficit. Our debt is over $16 trillion. Last summer, in fact, of all people, my opponent, John Larson, proposed a super committee when they couldn't agree on a budget, a way to address the debt. And they wanted to cut $1.2 trillion over 10 years, and they couldn't even do it. So now we're going to face this sequestration coming up because they couldn't do it. The debt ceiling is now $16.4 trillion, and we're going to hit that. And we may even hit it before the election, which would be an ironic thing. They put a deficit number, a debt number, that was so high that was supposed to carry us to January 2013, and we may hit it before the end of October. So our debt is unsustainable. And I know what it does to everyday individuals. I know what it does to businesses. I talk to these individuals every day. And the one thing that individuals and businesses do, that our government does not do is we adjust to the current economy. We make decisions based on what we have in front of us. If the economy slows down, if we have less money, we spend less, we cut back, and we do what we have to do to survive. Our government does the opposite. It prints money it doesn't have. In fact, we borrow 42 cents of every dollar. We borrow and we print money. And we ignore the words of Daniel Webster, who says the power to tax is the power to destroy. And we keep raising taxes and we keep spending money. And businesses they're frozen, individuals are getting hurt. And while the numbers, may seem insignificant because it's so hard to quantify really what $1 trillion is, and I've quantified it over time, and I won't get into it here. But what it's doing to the individual, it's causing the real inflation rate to go up, and that because wages are not increasing. They're increasing about a 1.8% annual rate right now. The Fed has a target rate of 2% inflation. You get a negative real wage growth, but you're getting a rising inflation in what is called a real inflation rate. That is destroying particularly the low-income individuals, the middle-class individuals, because individuals only have so much disposable income. If you think about what real inflation is, it's the inflation rate less the big one-time purchases. Real inflation is, let's back up. The inflation rate is defined of everything that you buy. So it includes a home, a car, a washing machine, all the big one-time items. The real inflation rate backs those out because the average person is not buying a house every day. They're not buying a car every day. So real inflation are things that you buy every day: gas, food, your utility bills, things that you like that. And that's going up 8% a year. In fact, if you go to my website, which is decker2012.com, all the facts I give you are pretty much hyperlinked on my website, because one of the things that drives me nuts about politicians is they give facts to kind of portray their own story as more favorable, and it just drives me nuts because in the real world, again, you deal with real facts. So I try to put all my facts on the web where you can go and click these stories and these links right there. But I have a CBS video that you can click on, and it talks about the real inflation rate being 8%. So what does that mean to the average individual living in Hartford or here in Torrington or across the entire 1st District? It means that what little disposable income they have is being eroded because they have to buy food and gas for their families. Everyone has to eat. Everyone has to drive their kids to school or drive themselves to work or get where they have to be. You have to buy gas. Connecticut has the highest gas prices in the nation, at least the continental U.S., if you throw out Hawaii and Alaska. It's a very difficult place to live. And our government's making it worse by printing money, causing real inflation to go up. We have a bad energy policy, which is doubling the negative effect of rising gas prices. And I just simply could not sit back and continue to watch and voice this, because I sit down with individuals pretty much very much like each of you individually in their offices, on their kitchen table, in their dining rooms, and we make financial plans. And we review them. They say, well, hey, this is our money, we'd like to do this. And I say, you know what, that's unfortunate, it's not realistic. You either need to work an extra year or assume that a different rate of return or take less money out. These are real conversations that each of you will have at some point in your life if you haven't already. And we make those decisions, again, based on what's going on in the economy and the market and interest rates. Think about the retirees right now. Right now, we are basically in a zero interest rate environment. Think what is happening to those individuals, those retirees that used to be able to get a 4 and 5% rate on their CD, that used to live on that fixed income. They can't get that anymore. The Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates artificially low right now, trying to jumpstart this economy, and they're failing it. They keep doing these quantitative easings. The first one worked a little bit. The second one is a little bit difficult. The third one you'll probably regret, right? And it's hurting us now, okay? But the people that are getting hurt the most, it's not the people that have the wealth. It's the people that are retired and don't have money in the market. An inflated stock market doesn't help the average person in this district. If anything, it hurts them because that real inflation rate's getting there. So again, why did I do this? Because I just couldn't. I know what's going on. I could not sit back and be quiet anymore. It was the toughest decision I've ever made in my life. Subjecting yourself to the scrutiny of the media. And I think half this room is probably media, right? I mean, I'm here for you and to answer your questions, but I mean, that's not something I really put myself up to do. But I realize it's part of what I'm doing. And putting my personal, my professional, my family life aside, man, I would love to be with my kids or take them to a football game at UConn, but I'll be walking neighborhoods because there's just too many things that are important. And I'm committed to this to make, if nothing else, to create awareness of what our politicians are doing to us. So a little bit longer intro than I anticipated, but I just want you to know that this has to be done. We have to realize what is going on in Washington, because if we don't, the consequences are just too great. You know, we're very fortunate we have a world that believes in our U.S. dollar, believes in our government. You know, we've never defaulted. But, you know, we just had our downgrade on our debt again. It was late Friday afternoon, so it was kind of lost what's going on in the Middle East right now and the tensions that are escalating. In 27 countries now we've had rebellions. But late Friday afternoon, Egan-Jones downgraded our debt to AA-. We're a step away from going to single A now. I mean, things are escalating for us, and we need to make the difficult choices. And I truly believe that our politicians are failing us. And I step forward to be here to represent you all. So with that being said, I mean, I believe the format is opening statement and primary questions, right?
Sure. So if anyone...
Excellent. And this is not a scared straight talk. You know, I don't mean to scare you all right off the bat. You know, I just want to tell you there are some important things that we need to be concerned with, and they're not being articulated by Washington. And I think the difference in that you will see from me, not only tonight but up until November 6th, is that I'm not a politician. I'll tell you what I believe is right or wrong. I'll give you the best answer I can, and we'll see if you agree or not. But I'll tell you the decisions that everyday people make, and I'll answer those questions for you.
Thank you, John.
Sure.
Would anyone like to start with questions this evening? Fran?
Someone's got to have a question, right?
Well, of course. It's November 7th. You've just been elected into office. What are the first three things that are on your list of agenda to work with the Senate to have enacted to fix the problems?
The first thing will probably be a little bit of amazement. You know, it'll be one of those things that, wow, this actually happened, now what? And, you know, now, but the work will begin. You know, it's one of those things that I look forward to doing, because I truly believe that if I'm elected, if an individual that can come from the community that is not a politician gets elected, defeating an incumbent that's the chairman of the Democrat caucus, I'm not going to be the only individual like that. There'll be a lot of other individuals that are stepping forward, speaking up, that will be the representative of their communities. And we will all go to Washington together to do what's right. We will get back to what I've been calling a citizens' Congress. We have to get back to a citizens' Congress. People that are only interested in serving, you know, our district and our country for whatever term it may be. You know, when our founders discovered this country, they never envisioned that people would go to Congress for 10, 20, 30 years and become a career politician. You know, when the Constitution was written, when people went to Congress, it was you would go serve your country. You would work in that, you know, would work there, and you return to your agrarian society and to your community. I intend to go there, you know, and make the decisions and work. I think there will be a sense of urgency. Again, we're going to have a debt ceiling debate again, and we've got rising tensions. There's going to be a definite urgency, and I think that there's going to be enough people elected, I believe, like myself, that are ready to make the difficult choices.
So you see the debt being cut?
The debt's going to be solved really by economic growth. And economic growth will solve a lot of the problems that I've addressed. And I think that's what gets lost in the politics between the Democrats and Republicans, the partisanship that you'll see. Because, and again, this is what's unfortunate in politics. You have the Democrats over here say, well, we have to raise taxes, and we have to raise it on the people making above whatever threshold you want to put in there. You have the Republicans say, we have to cut taxes across the board. They're forgetting the easiest way to get this economy going, the easiest way to solve our debt problems is economic growth. Economic growth will solve a lot of problems, because if you have economic growth, you have more people working. With more people working, you have more consumer confidence, more discretionary spending. With more discretionary spending, manufacturers and producers are going to see that, and they're going to start producing and hiring more and start growing. You're going to have more people working and paying more taxes to the government. You know, that's going to take care of our deficits and debt. So what do? We really need to focus on how to get the economy going more than creating class envy and taxes and who gets cuts in here and there. Leave the tax rates where they are. Give businesses the certainty of what they can plan for right now. If there's any small business, I mean, the small business, ask any small, if you own your business, if the small business owner back there, what you all need, I'm assuming more than anything, is some kind of certainty to plan your businesses. That you, I mean, as investors, as an innovator, you want to calculate what your rate of return is, and is it worth that risk that you're taking? We've got to create an economy that's growing. And the way you do is you continue to get government out of the way, you continue to take away the uncertainties, and you give them the ability to produce or grow in this economy. Yes?
John Lavery, Barkhamsted. I agree with you about growth being the solution for the debt. However, it will only be a solution if we can fix the annual deficits.
Agreed.
Our federal spending has gone to 25% of GDP from an historical average of something, I think, like 19 or 20.
18.8.
19.8. So what can we do about that, John?
Well, again, spending is a major concern because it's really exploded in the last 4 years. In 2008, we had about $2.7 trillion budget. We're at 3.9. We're probably around there, so that's at $1.3 trillion deficit. You know, if you round the numbers, it's a little bit off. Spending just has to get under control. I mean, there's so many pet projects, but what you have to do is you just can't balance a budget in the first year out. You know, as much of it as we need to cut $1.3 trillion in spending, you're not going to be able to do that the first year. You're going to really throw us further into recession. But there has to be a definite plan to eliminate the wasteful spending in government. And you know, the big question, you know, you always get is, what department would you cut? It's not just what department, you know, and departments can be merged. It's happened in this state. We merge departments, but you know, you replace by attrition. You know, when people retire, they go out there, we don't replace those positions. We have to consolidate. We've got to reduce the size of government. And again, the focus has to be on growing the economy, but the spending has to be reined in too, absolutely. And we have to look at where the spending increases came from in the last 3-4 years and try to get back to, you know, 2008, 2009 levels that are manageable.
I have read, and you may probably know more about this than I do, but I have read that if we eliminated all spending on the operation of the government, we still would not have enough revenue to cover the cost of the entitlements to which we're committed. And if that's true, how do we find our way out of this hole?
Well, that's the scary part about this. I mean, I made the joke that this isn't intended to be a scared straight, but it is a serious matter, and it's that plus the total net interest on the debt. You know, what he's referring to is last year in 2011, according to the GAO, Government Accountability Office, we paid $454 billion in interest on our debt. I mean, think about how much money. That's almost $500 billion that's taken out of our pockets as taxpayers that's paid on interest. And it's an amazing number. I mean, I will back up and try to quantify the dollars because now we're talking about dollars more, and it's hard unless you can truly fathom how large they are. You know, when I was going through the convention, and again, being a financial planner, I understand these numbers fairly clearly. But the average person can't fathom what $1 billion is, let alone $1 trillion or even $16 trillion. So the only way I could do is try to think of time. I mean, people have a pretty good concept of what 1,000 years, 2,000 years ago, you know, 100,000, whatever it may be, how long it goes. So my analogy was a dollar. If I gave you $1 1 second, every single second for the next year, how much money would you have? The answer after 1 year, obviously I'd get in trouble for buying votes, but I mean, I give you $1 every second for a year, you'd have $31,557,000. You know, a lot of money. To get to $1 trillion to do that, it would take me 32,000 years of giving you $1 every second to get to that $1 trillion. And you multiply that by 16, where we are at 512,000 years. So we're talking 500,000 years. I mean, it's an amazing number. So the interest on our debt, $454 billion. We are fortunate right now, and this is why I personally get very nervous and scared, and maybe this is a little bit of the, you know, where Ron Paul talks about our debt. But when you think about the interest and where our interest rates are right now, if interest rates go up 1%, and that's not a big movement where they are right now, our debt's going to explode over $1 trillion for every 1% upwards. And that's where it really starts to get unsustainable. So we have to have representatives. We have to elect individuals that understand this because we cannot keep ignoring it. These politicians, they go there for a certain number of years, and it changes over from being a representative to about self-preservation. And unfortunately, that's where I believe my opponent is right now. You know, when do you ever hear him talk about his concern about the debt or spending? In fact, last year when he wanted a jobs bill, he wanted his jobs bill to be larger. He wanted Obama to spend more than the $454 billion that he proposed. It's just not sustainable. So it is forefront in my mind of how bad our debt, how bad our spending, how bad the interest, what we're paying. Because the other side of that is there will come a time when Japan, China, Germany, other countries in the world say, you know what, your debt got downgraded again. You're spending $1.3 trillion a year that you don't have. You're borrowing 42 cents of every dollar. We're not buying your 30-year Treasury bond anymore for 2.8%. And what happens then? You know, and that's where it could get really scary, what could happen in this country. And, you know, you never ever want to envision or think about something like that or even see that, obviously. But, you know, ask any business owner, ask any individual if they ever prepare for, like, the contingency plan, the what ifs. Ask our government if they've ever done that. Ask our government if they've ever said, what if China says that we're not buying your bonds anymore? They're already backing off some of their purchases. But what if rates go to 5%? Ask them what they're going to do then. There's not an answer because they don't want to tell you what it is. And that's a concern. And that's why we have to be there. So I know it's a great, windy, stormy evening, but, these are the things that we're facing right now.
John, I'm glad you're concerned about the interest. That's a big problem. But if our entitlements, the entitlements we pay to ourselves, are greater than our revenue stream, we have to find some deep and painful solution to that. Have you given thought to that?
Yeah, I have, and it's not great. It's a difficult decision. I mean, the person made famous Minsky, that Minsky moment. Was an economist that said, "What happens when your revenues just can't keep up with your debt payments?" And we're close to that, and that's where you could see even rioting. You could see rebellion. I mean, look what happened. It's happened in Greece and Spain. You'd hate to think it could ever happen here, but again, if you don't think it could ever happen here, it just shows a failure to look at the possibilities and the outcomes. So spending has to get under control, but I think the best way to close our deficits is economic growth, because more people work is more taxes and revenue to the government. I mean, I'll show you again why the raising taxes is solely not the solution, particularly in this type of environment. The big thing earlier in this year, I think everyone heard of the Warren Buffett, the Buffett tax. That the Buffett tax is going to raise $49 billion over 10 years. Sounds like a lot of money, right? The problem is we go into debt $4.9 billion a day. So here's the thing that's going to raise, actually, it's $47 billion over 10 years. But we're going to go into that, we're going to add that to our debt in 10 days. So what progress are we making, right? But politicians like to get reelected, and they use numbers, they manipulate numbers for what they are. So we'll see if it gets me elected or not, being straightforward and saying how concerned we all should be. But if we keep printing money, we're going to go straight from a low interest rate environment to a hyperinflation environment, and that's going to be very destructive to low income and for our country. So it's a hyperinflation down the road that we have to be concerned with. All right. Any good questions? Anything I can talk positively? Slade, let me go just around the table.
My question is, since we're struggling with jobs, and you said that we have to have growth in the economy.
No, we need growth. There's not a lot of growth.
Yeah, we need growth in the economy. And if you cut government, now my understanding of if you cut government means you cut in jobs. So more people is going to be unemployed. So now more people is going to go on unemployment. So now these people who's paying taxes are not paying taxes anymore.
Okay.
Now, the jobs bill, had they passed the jobs bill a year ago, we will stimulate the economy. Instead of giving tax cut to people, you
Right.
take this money and you invest it in the country. So now you're rebuilding the country, bridges, schools. So now you're creating jobs instead of giving the money to people. Will that stimulate the economy? Don't you think that would be more beneficial to the country?
Well, let me break that down a little bit. First off, I don't think cutting government jobs is a bad thing. I mean, a government job is not a producer. It's a service, and a lot of the services are replicated. You own your own business, and you're a producer. You're a manufacturer. You're a concrete business, you said. So you hire real people in the world that actually produce something, a concrete slab for a building, whatever it may be. Someone in the government office is again, it's a service job. I think the biggest fallacy is that people believe the government is a creator of jobs. I think that's false. And that's probably the biggest difference as far as from an economic standpoint where we start between my opponent, John Larson, and myself, is I don't believe the government's a creator of jobs. I believe they create the environment in which jobs are created, and that can be pro-business or anti-business, but I don't believe they create jobs as subsistence. They're service-oriented. They basically are there to service us. As individuals, as taxpayers, and as business owners. So the businesses, losing government jobs and reducing government jobs by consolidating and getting rid of overlap is not a bad thing. Let's get them more in productive part of society where they're actually producing something. As far as spending, again, this is where you have partisan politics. The Republicans have put 27 job bills forward, and not a single one has brought up in the Senate by Harry Reid. There have been a couple that have been advanced that were solely based upon raising taxes on other individuals out of the Senate from the Democrat side. So you've got this partisanship divide, and nothing's getting done. So it's, you know, you have a stalemate going on, and it's the vitriol between the two sides. It's somewhat embarrassing. It's frustrating as an individual to see it. You know, we've all worked with people that we may have not agreed with, but we've come together with a common goal, and they don't do it there. But no, I think the elimination of government jobs is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, because, again, government jobs are very, very expensive. They're more expensive than the private sector. Look at the benefits they get, the medical, the pension, the salaries that they get. And, again, they're not a producer. The government, you know, is something that creates the environment for jobs, but not actual jobs. You know, that's why I don't understand why people always just wait around for the government jobs plan. You know, I don't see the government. Look at the stimulus bill. That was supposed to jumpstart America. We spent $830 billion when all said and told. It simply added to our debt. You know, we have the slowest economic recovery in history. If you want more facts from that, we've had 10 economic recessions since World War II. The average job growth rate coming out of recession, 8.3%. We're at 4.3 for the last 30 months after the recession ended. So half that. So what they did, this jobs bill, what it did, it was based upon crony capitalism. It gave carve-outs to certain industries that liked the money. It didn't go directly to create new bridges. I mean, in fact, our infrastructure is worse than it's ever been. So I don't think that stimulus bill was effective at all. I think it simply added to debt.
And that stimulus, I think half of this, I think at least 45% of that stimulus was tax cut. This is exactly what I'm saying. If you take $800 billion, we know what the country needs. Now, 10 years ago, there was a tax cut gave to over $1 trillion was given tax cut. Now, the stimulus is passed.
Wait, so they're getting a year ago $1 trillion in tax cuts?
10 years ago. There was a tax cut that was given from George Bush
Yes.
Jr. And now, I believe it's 2009 when they passed the stimulus, $800 billion. They still gave 45% of tax cut again. Why shouldn't they just take the whole $800 billion and then just invest it in the country?
Well, that's
we
a question.
Think there will be a lot of work will be created that way.
Well, I agree. That's a question you got to ask. Why, you know, President Obama and everyone that's elected in office, you know, why didn't they actually spend that money for real jobs? There wasn't a tax cut in that stimulus bill. You know, the tax cuts that were enacted under George Bush in the early 2000s, they were extended. So it wasn't like they were further reduced. They're extended. There have been no additional tax cuts since that last tax cut. So there's a big difference when you hear, like, you know, right now the campaign's talking about, you know, they want to cut taxes. No one's saying about cutting taxes. They're talking about extending them. An extension is not a cut. So they're extending them. And they were very effective if you look at the economic growth we had, you know, in 2000, you know, after they were done. But the stimulus bill is completely different. That was a spending bill. In fact, you may go back. That's one of the first things that kind of started to raise my ire about getting in the race. You know, we all got those postcards that talked about congratulations, you'll soon get your stimulus check, go spend it and save America. You know, and again, I work with a lot of companies, and I specialize in the 401k plans. And as I was talking to the employees, I asked them, I said, did you get your stimulus check? And they said, yes. I said, did you spend it to save America? Do you know what they all told me? No, they saved it because they're worried about losing their job. They paid off their past due heating oil bill. They paid down their credit card bill. That was just the money that actually went to individuals as taxpayers, was given to them, did not grow the economy at all. In fact, there was a study that came out yesterday that showed, you know, obviously it looks at the numbers from the government GDP growth or lack thereof, and for every $3 the government spent, GDP growth was $1. So it's a reverse of what should be happening right now.
I think that's the reason why I'm saying, instead of giving money to send the money to people, you take the money and you invest in the country. Then you create jobs. Because by giving, I'm not a good believer in tax cut, because I think it's just giving money away. You know, you give money away, at the end, you don't see anything happen. Most of the people take the money and they put the money away. They don't really invest the money because you're afraid, oh, I'm not going to give that money away. I'm not going to spend it because I don't know what's going to happen. But if you take that money, you invest in the country, you build new schools, new bridges, you do different stuff, senior centers, whatever they need, then you create more jobs. Then I get a couple projects, I hire somebody.
That's right.
I buy concrete, then I buy rebar, and then you create jobs. Then everything, the whole country is going to have a boom then. But if you give me a tax cut, what I'm going to do with it, I'm going to put it somewhere, I'm not going to spend it. And that's the reason why everybody complaining, saying that the stimulus didn't work. It did work a certain way, but it didn't work the way it was supposed to work, because the people who make decisions, there was so much fighting about it that they had to please everybody on the other side. And therefore, it just didn't work because they watered it down so much, it was not effective. There was no substance to it.
I agree. I think that stimulus bill was ill-fated from the beginning. You know, in fact, it's one of the reasons I got involved in politics. In 2009, I even sent President Obama a letter telling him that, you know, it was congratulatory. I wished him well. I congratulated him on his historic election, but I told him his stimulus bill was ill-fated. And I CC'd even my representative, my opponent now, John Larson, who sent me a letter back and said, no, this spending is important. And why I articulated, you know, why I thought it would fail, you know, he said, no, it's necessary to invest in clean energy. And, you know, and we look what happened with all the clean energy investments like Solyndra and Abound Solar and First Trust Solar. And we lost $90 billion in clean energy. So out of $90 billion we lost in bankruptcies, you know, from clean energy. You look at the other things they did with it. You know, again, my opponent said that they would cut the deficit by 2/3 by this time, you know, today that we're talking. And that letter is actually posted on my website. Again, so go read John Larson's letter about why he thought that stimulus bill would be effective and if it actually made sense. And it doesn't, because nothing proved successful with that money. So I agree with you that could have been a much better way to do that.
Would you support construction of the pipeline that's been so much in the news the last few months?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. He's referring to the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline, to me, was really a no-brainer. I mean, it was treated with partisan politics. It was treated as a pipeline, as a new technology that we can't trust. There are thousands of miles of pipeline, actually almost going to very close to where this pipeline is. I mean, without pipelines, we wouldn't have any natural gas or oil or any of our energy sources, flowing across our country. And we had a chance to get a strategic reserve oil, which we have to have from a friendly ally just north of us, and keep it here in this country and refine it here, which would create more jobs. 20,000 jobs were the low-end estimates, consensus estimates that would be created. And it was locked up. And it was kind of thrown out basically on an environmental battle and really, energy policy. But what it would have done, it would have done a couple of things. The first thing I would have really liked we needed is go back to 1977. It's when the Department of Energy was created. And the whole purpose of that department was to get us off the dependency of foreign oil. Now it's 16,000 jobs and we're more dependent on foreign oil than ever. I mean, how have they been successful? Look at the jobs that are there. I mean, look what they've done. The money, it has a budget of $24 billion a year. And you look what's going on in the Middle East right now. You know, if we get any kind of interruption to the oil supply in the Middle East and Iran, bombs or mines the Strait of Hormuz and shuts down oil spots, I mean, it's going to be catastrophic effects to our economy. It's also causing oil and gas prices to go up right now. Again, so people that buy, low-income individuals that have to buy gas, they're getting hit twice because we're printing money, causing real inflation rate to go up, and we have no energy policy to speak of. And that would also shown I think one of the best things it could have done, that XL pipeline, it could have shown a very serious commitment to actually, for the first time, trying to become more independent upon foreign oil, which would, again, it's supply and demand. If we're going to start bringing in more oil in and send a message to the world, you're going to see oil prices fall too. So it was a multiple win-win-win, and I was just disappointed that it got voted down. And John Larson voted against it earlier this year too, which I don't understand because it hurts his people in the 1st Congressional District, again, more than anyone, particularly in Hartford.
You have a question, Wendy?
Yeah, I'm toying with 2 different topics,
We've got time.
First of all, as a small business owner, and we are still a corporation, which is unusual for small business owners, I have to say that if people don't realize that anything over $100,000 in profit is taxed at almost 40%. So my concern, obviously, is not just corporations who are small businesses. We're not talking about billion-dollar corporations in New York and Chicago. We're talking about small business owners who could still be corporations. We're talking about individuals who have LLCs or S-corps where the profit flows through to their personal tax return. And we keep hearing these numbers thrown around. 200,000 or 250,000 is that middle income family type thing. And my concern with those numbers is people think of that in terms of their salary. And well, if they make $250,000 a year, they're doing well off. The problem is they could also have a small business with 15 or 20 employees, and unfortunately the profit flows through to the person. It's not cash, it's
right.
Profit. So I'm very concerned with the talk about going back or increasing those tax rates again on corporations. The majority of companies, especially in Connecticut, are small businesses. And I don't think people realize that those tax rates are not for rich billionaires in New York City. These are small business owners throughout America who are trying to make ends meet. And my question following up on that is, we also are told, and we hear numbers back and forth, approximately 50% of Americans do not pay 1 penny in tax. So the question somebody posed to me was, why is it that every time we have a problem with our government spending that we go to Social Security and Medicare and we start telling people on the front page of the newspaper that your Social Security is going defunct and the elderly are going to lose their money, but we do never talk about there's not enough money in the federal government now for entitlement programs. So my question is, obviously at this point, why do we always go to Social Security and Medicare and threaten people and put it on the front page of the paper so everybody starts screaming and yelling because as an elderly person they want to live, but we don't ever talk about the billions of dollars that we do put in, and I don't even know how many there are, the hundreds of thousands of different entitlement programs, which flows into the other question, which is education, and how do you feel about
Got a lot in this question here.
well, because it all ties together. The taxes, the fact that there's not enough people paying in taxes, and then the entitlement programs, and that the federal government has all these rules and regulations on education, which we all know are very costly and flow through to our states and our municipalities. And it does all flow together. I just don't know how you feel about the tax structure and then of how it affects whether we should have a federal education program or it should be the states that have their own.
I'll start with the simple answer. I'll go to the beginning and I'll work back to education. The simple answer, I think education should be left to the states. You know, I think states and even local municipalities are best served in your community making the, that's why you have a board of ed and doing that first. But let me jump back up about jobs. I am worried about the class warfare, the envy. You know, I'm sure it has that 250 has a lot to do with polling of where the numbers are and where the voters are, and what's the top 2 or 3%, 1%, and it's right around that threshold is where it is there. The families that make $250,000 to be compared to the Warren Buffetts and Bill Gates of the world and the people that make millions and billions of dollars a year, it's not fair to them because those individuals are small business. How many employees do you have in your business?
Well, unfortunately, we used to be almost 20, now we're at 5.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've cut back because in order to probably survive in the same business, and you're making those decisions right now. But someone that owns a business and has $250,000 to be categorized as this huge again paint you as a corporation that has billions of dollars is not fair because they don't you're working 7 days a week, you're taking all the personal risk and the liability and everything like that, and it's tough. But I mean, it's a political game. And if they can get more people to say, yeah, $250,000 is where the envy should start, that's what they'll do, whatever it is. But if you have children and you have daycare, you have to plan for their college. $250, you're going to be an AMT. You're not going to get any college grants, or so you've got to save every single dollar for their education. I mean, at that level, every single thing is on you as far as financial planning, because AMT is going to wipe out all your deductions, alternative minimum tax. You're not going to get any scholarships or Pell Grants for education for your kids, and you're going to have all the liability exposure and risk of your own business growing forward. So I don't think our politicians, again, truly understand what it's like to own a business or be an individual like yourself at that level. And I think there's got to be a huge demarcation from a family of your own and a business owner at $250,000 for someone that's making $1 million or $5 million or $10 million and above. And it's just not fair to put them in that same group. Jumping down to the entitlements. I mean, the entitlement growth in the last couple of years is again, it's another word I'll use a lot. It's unsustainable. I mean, the federal government now is paying states $500 billion to enroll people on food stamps. They're telling people to go out, and states, of course, are trying to find ways to qualify people for food stamps and disability because they'll get money from the government for the more people they enroll. I mean, where's the incentive to actually get people off it and producing and working and back on their own when the states that are running budget deficits can get money from the federal government for the more people they enroll? I mean, the system's reversed. The states should get more money for actually getting people off and working and producing more, not for getting them on. I mean, we don't. And I guess that where you said half of the population doesn't pay tax. We're becoming very complacent and of being an entitlement society, of being dependent. Years ago, I mean, there's a lot of pride of not, being on a handout from the government. Now it's like, how much more can I get? And, I don't know if we're going to, get past that or not. But I remember my mother worked 2 jobs. She worked all day long. She'd come in a waitress. I worked as and again, on my website, I've got these paychecks. You can go there. I worked full-time as a senior in high school. I made $3.65 an hour. When I told my mother I was going to run, she actually mailed me a copy of my paycheck. And, I worked 37 hours as a senior in high school, and that check's there. I mean, and this is what we did. I helped put food on our table for my mom raising us because I knew how much she didn't have any more to give. And we probably could have qualified, but we didn't. I don't think she ever took anything. In fact, I'd be certain she didn't. But society's changed, and I think people now, it's like, I want that too. And the easiest way to do it is create class envy, make people jealous, and try to get it from the government. And instead of trying to encourage them that they can do better than just doing at the minimum level what the government will get you. And that's what we have to overcome, is the apathy where people lose the desire to be successful, to grow out, to grow above a class. I mean, I'm surprised that people are complacent and just content of wanting to stay with just the minimum government payments. I would think that, we need to encourage them to go to that if you're in the lower income class, go to be middle class. Let them live that American dream too. But that's a tough situation. As far as education, I said it earlier, the states have to have more control. No Child Left Behind. It's a great idea in theory. A lot of government ideas are great in theory, but in practicality, you implement them and they're detrimental. I mean, you're seeing now teachers will lose jobs if kids aren't at a certain level. So now they focus on the 2 or 3 kids that aren't at a level and get them to that level where the other kids wait for it, to get around. And it's a big concern of mine. It's a big concern if you ever talk to a teacher off record, on their own. I think they're frustrated by it too. You won't get them called out in an assembly meeting, but individually, yeah. I mean, I think they're frustrated because, again, they have to teach a minimum standard, not an achievement standard.
You said government shouldn't be a job creator. Government should actually cut jobs, a lot of bureaucracy. Yet you're running for a government job, taxpayer-funded, a salary, pension, and then on top of that, you're saying economic growth.
Right.
Can you give some specifics how a government-funded job that's not supposed to create jobs is going to encourage economic growth?
Well, I think the people that let's back it up a little bit. I said that there's an overlap in government jobs, and that the government has to get more efficient, just like any business. Talk to any business owner in this room or anywhere in Torrington or in the district, and Wendy just she had 20 employees, she's down to 5. They've cut back and done what they've had to do to survive. I'm in a Quest program through Leadership Greater Hartford right now. We work with a lot of nonprofit organizations. Go to any nonprofit agency in Torrington or in Hartford, anywhere else. Ask them what they've done to get by. They're working on bare bone budgets right now. They're getting by on everything they can. They've cut back where they have. Our government hasn't done that. So when I explained that, I was just simply trying to say that our government has to get more efficient and make the same sacrifices that individuals like Wendy, who's running, and other agencies out there have cut back and be more efficient. As far as being a government employee, yes, it's an oxymoron. And what I'll tell you is, again, this isn't something I ever envisioned to do. This isn't something I ever strived to want to be a politician. This is something I felt called to do because I can't sit back and complain and watch what's going on. As I said, it's a shame that I have to do this and put my personal life and professional life aside. But our politicians across the board are failing us. They're spending money we don't have, and we have to call them out on it. So was there a last part of that question? There are a couple parts of it.
Yeah, so how are you said that government's not to create jobs, but you kept talking about economic growth.
I said what the government is not the real creator of jobs. They create the environment which jobs are created. So if I'm elected, we have to create an environment where you can have job growth. So how do you do that? Well, part to Wendy's statement or question, I would cut the corporate tax rate. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world now. We were the second highest until Japan actually reduced theirs, now exposing us to be the highest corporate tax rate in the world. We've got to do that. Let companies have more money so they can hire more people. They can reinvest in their companies. They can grow their company, build a factory, manufacturing, hire more workers, whatever it may be. If companies have more money, they'll use it and reinvest it. The more money companies that the government takes from them, the less they have to invest in themselves and expand. The other thing I would do and this is on a larger scale. In 2004, as a matter of fact, Congress passed a special resolution that allowed companies to repatriate foreign profits overseas during a limited window. And it was at a reduced rate of 5.25% rather than at the corporate tax rate. During that period, companies brought over $300 billion back during that window. Now, why is that important? Because right now there's companies that have $2 trillion of cash overseas that's already been taxed at a foreign corporate tax rate that is just sitting idle. And if we don't let companies bring that back, and we're going to tax it again at the highest corporate tax rate in the world, they're not going to bring it back. That's why there's $2 trillion still over there. If we open that window, they'll bring that money back. If we don't let them bring it back, they're going to find something to do with it. They're not going to let it sit there in cash idly. They're going to build factories, manufacturing plants, and expand overseas, and those jobs and that money will be gone forever. I would also reform the tax code. It's filled with loopholes. It's basically created by lobbyist influence. It picks winners and losers. It's flawed. We've got to get to it. We've got to get rid of the loopholes and make it equal to everyone. What else would I know there's some. The regulations is the biggest one. You have to have. We've got to get rid of these regulations. Again, the more regulations you throw on a business, the tougher it is for them to go. I mean, to start a business today, it's so difficult from all the bonding, the insurance, the environmental studies you have to go through. I mean, all the things, employment, everything you have to do. I mean, regulation after regulation after regulation, all different sides. It may be fine as an individual basis, one regulation here, one regulation there, but you start putting them all together, and it just becomes overbearing, and people want to give up. I was actually talking to a couple in here earlier tonight, and they were talking about how burdensome the regulations are getting across the board, and that's what's happening right now. Go to your local bank, any savings bank in this town, and ask them what Dodd-Frank has done to them. Ask them why they can't lend right now. They're overburdened right now. They have so much compliance requirements, they can't keep up with the demand for small loans. And on top of that, because of the Dodd-Frank requirements as far as capital requirements, they're afraid to lend because they may not have their next requirements that come through under Basel III. So not only do they don't have the ability to lend because they have so many requirements and compliance now, they're also frozen too. So you've got to reduce the regulations on businesses. And the other thing I would say is, as far as economic growth, you've got to end the uncertainty of the fiscal cliff. There's $500 billion that's about ready to be pulled out of the private sector on January 2013. And again, businesses not knowing what's going to be in effect on 2013 from this, the surtax for Obamacare, the increase in taxes, everything else that's going to kick in, the increase in payroll taxes. Again, it's $500 billion, and those businesses aren't hiring right now because they don't know what to expect on January 2013. So what's that, 5 things right there?
Thank you.
Sure. Is that enough? Do you have enough paper?
Yep.
So again, I don't think there's as a newly elected representative, those are simple ideas when you think about it. I mean, they're not anything that someone shouldn't think of, and how to make, how do we get government out of the way? I mean, that should be the thing. I mean, go back to World War II. If I can, I know someone had a question over here. If I can, I'll give you a quick story, and I've said this before when I've asked before, but in World War II, we had to mobilize for the war. And FDR, who was our president at the time, was in a quandary on how to do it. He was anti-big business. He was creator of the New Deal, and but he saw the Hitler's blitzkrieg, mobilizing, taking down democracies across Europe, and he knew he had to do something differently. So he actually called the president of General Motors, who was the president, and he was a wizard of mass production, and he basically said, "Help me mobilize for the war." And what William Knudsen told him, "I will, under one condition." And he goes, "You listen to what I recommend." And he said, "Okay." And that was against FDR, that had made that decision against the lobbying of his entire administration, his cabinet, his wife. And so when he told FDR, he said, "You have to get rid of the anti-competitive tax burdens. You have to reduce regulations. You have to let the military give orders directly to the manufacturers, as opposed to you telling the government telling the manufacturers what they should produce." I mean, they're just, again, some common sense things, but the common theme was to get government's interference out of the way of production, of manufacturing. And when World War II ended, we didn't go into a recession. In fact, manufacturing production exploded because now businesses unencumbered with the regulations and the taxes, they started producing washing machines and cars and tractors. and we had one of the greatest economic growth areas back then too. So, I mean, what I'm saying is not new, it's not complicated, but I just think, again, we've gone to a society where everyone looks for the government, they regulate too much, and they're in the way of businesses. Sorry, you had a question?
I just wanted to touch on Obamacare and
Yeah.
healthcare.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
But, you know, the main thing is the economy and jobs are so important, and it's what, you know, it's obviously something I'm concerned and familiar with. Obamacare. I'm actually one for repealing Obamacare, and the simple reason why is to start over. This, again, goes to the premise why, for whatever reason, people seem to think that the government always has the answers to everything, not the private sector. The premise of Obamacare is great in its simplicity. Provide health insurance for everyone, reduce medical costs. Everyone in this room wants that, right? Is there anyone in this room who would not want insurance for everyone and to reduce medical costs? It's make all the sense in the world. The problem was, as they wrote this monstrous bill and they locked people out and they wrote it in back doors, they threw out the cost control components. And they said, we're just going to give everyone insurance. And then they said, how do we pay for this? How do we make it budget neutral so we can give political cover for the people that vote for it? Well, they put in things like, a reduced reduced payment rates in Medicare, which there's been 14 bills that are voted every year. I mean, it's becoming a budget gimmick. Every year they say they're going to reduce the Medicare reimbursement rate, and then, they pass the bill at the last second. But the CBO has to score a bill the way it's passed. So there are all these, taxes in there for 10 years, but benefits start for the last 4 years to make it look as budget neutral as it did. And now it's, it's going to look like it's going to have $1.9 trillion over 10 years. The other problem I had with Obamacare is the ways it forced upon us. It was through a special reconciliation process. If you remember, there are 3 senators that would not vote for it to get past the 60. That would make it basically where you could not override it. And so what happened to us as taxpayers? Well, Louisiana, the senator in Louisiana, Mary Landrieu, got $300 million for her state from us as taxpayers to vote for it and favor it. Ben Nelson, the Cornhusker kickback, got $100 million. And then there's another senator up from, I believe it was Cole from Wisconsin, and he got his thing, which actually was later ignored. So, I mean, it was forced through us through a special process, so it never really went through a vote. So that being said, we have to get back to enacting bills with input from people in the field. Imagine writing bills if you've never been in that industry. So we have to have, it should have been a special blue ribbon panel or some kind of legislative session that included doctors and physicians. The one thing I would tell you right now, the next time you go visit your doctor, next time you go visit your cardiologist, your OBGYN, your urologist, whatever specialist it may be, neurologist, ask them what IPAB is and what it's going to do for their personal care with you. The Independent Payment Advisory Board that was thrown in this thing, the way to control costs, is going to completely remove the doctor-patient discussions of medical care from you. It's going to be a board that determines if you qualify for care based on your conditions, and even really if you're a giver or taker of society. If you pay taxes or you're on the government, payroll, basically getting disability or insurance or Social Security, et cetera. But IPAB is virtually unappealable. It's 15 individuals that are only a minimum of under 5 can be actual physicians, and they're going to determine the future of your care, not directly with the doctors. And I don't think that's the way it should be done. So I think we need to get back. The reason, again, the simple reason to appeal Obamacare is to focus on reducing costs, and that's by providing more competition, say, against state lines, providing tort reform and insurance relief for physicians and practices. And they'll tell you one of the largest escalating components is their medical malpractice insurance. And again, the benefits and the premise on our Obamacare were great. We can do that, but we have to have more common sense and be honest about it and not hide some independent payment advisory board that's going to take away the personal decisions that we have. Because what we're going to get, and everyone talks about the Canadian health system, Google the Newfoundland Prime Minister and heart surgery, and you'll see an example where how good the healthcare system is in Canada. And a couple years ago, the Prime Minister from Newfoundland had a heart condition that was life-threatening. And he could have, because of his position, he could have had surgery immediately. But as a regular citizen, it would have taken 6 months before he could have had that surgery. And he didn't want to jump the list and have special treatment. He personally flew for a trip to Florida to have that heart surgery so he wouldn't die because doctors didn't think he would make it for 6 months. That's coming if we don't repeal this bill. And there's got to be a better way to involve the doctors and the patient directly and not a board deciding what we get. So I'm concerned with it.
We got time for a couple more questions.
In terms of Obamacare, I've been hearing on the Republican side, they want to repeal it. Mm-hmm. Now you want to be a fresh Senate, House of Representatives, and you have you're saying the same thing, you want to repeal it. Isn't that a sign that you're already aligning yourself to have that same voice to block certain things, to still be a gridlock in Washington? Because if you're saying the same thing that the Republican people saying, therefore people are already seeing you as the same kind. Now, how can you say those things and say you're going in there to bring change?
Well, that's on one issue. And I just told you, three or four reasons why I would appeal Obamacare. And that's because the premise being again, getting back to Obamacare, there's not a single individual in this room, a single person I'll ever talk to that says giving everyone health insurance and reducing the cost of health insurance is a bad thing. I mean, it's a wonderful premise. The problem is the process of being fiscally responsible as far as leaving the decisions between the patient and the doctor were thrown out. The cost controls were thrown out. They have to do that in a better way. So in that one issue, yes, I do think that it has to be redone. And I would say, the same conditions that you want to put in as far as, including pre-existing conditions, that's fine. As far as, wanting to keep people on your insurance until they're 26 under the parents' policy, that's fine too. But you've got to be able to account for it. You've got to be able to include it and run, models on what it costs. You can't mislead the public and say it's budget neutral. It's not going to add the debt when now it's showing it's going to add $1.9 trillion. That's all. So that's on one issue. Yes. An IPAB, next time you go see your doctor, ask your physician what IPAB stands for and what it will do to your personal, relationship if you ever come down with a disease or cancer, whatever it may be.
I understand what you're saying, but the moment you say you're going to repeal, you're already sounding like the other ones. But if you pinpoint whatever you don't think that works, you singularize certain things, okay? So you want to present yourself different. Okay, this is what I don't think that's good. This is what I think that's good. And whatever is good, we're going to keep it. Whatever I don't think that's good, I think we can work on that and try to fix it and make everything better.
Well, you can't get rid of IPAB, the Independent Payment Advisory Board. That is so well interwoven into the bill that unless you repeal Obamacare, it is in there until 2017 with only 3/4 of a vote to get it out, and then it's definite after 2020. It's never, you can never get rid of it. And if you want to get rid of that advisory board, it's the only way you can do it.
Well, that's encouraging.
I'm just telling you. I mean, it's that bill was written, and again, even the people, even the 15 individuals on that board are unaccountable to Congress. I mean, so there's no accountability to that board either. I mean, it's a dangerous thing, and I think it should be a concern to all of us. As we age, or people have parents that age, or whatever it may be. But it's something that people need to be aware of. They weren't told about it when it was passed, but it's in there.
I got one more question.
Sure.
Since I came to the United States, I heard the health care that was there before Obamacare. It was activated. That's what's going on. Nobody did anything about it. Democrat or Republican, nobody did anything about it. Cost was going up. People were without insurance. People went bankrupt. Whatever it is. But the moment Obamacare came on the scene, all of a sudden everybody unhappy. But before it came on the scene, why nobody did anything about it? Why everybody complaining? Instead of they want to get rid of it, let's come together and try to make it much better instead of, against it 100%. Because I'm pretty sure there's people that benefit from it. There's some people who probably have money, they don't need it. We got to analyze it and see, okay, there's people who need this, but we're going to have to try to make it work for everybody.
I agree. I mean, Obama should be commended for discussing an important, situation as health insurance. Much like any politician that wants to bring up, entitlement reform should be commended for at least bringing up a very a very difficult political topic. People need to bring things up. It's the way it was done. It was what was put in it, and the cost of it that is wrong with it, and it has to be done in a better way. They didn't include doctors in this. They did it behind closed doors. It was supposed to be a bipartisan thing. It wasn't. It was behind closed doors, and they forced this thing through, and then it went through a special reconciliation process to get this thing through. So, I mean, it didn't even get voted on properly. I mean, and again, and that's not the way government works. They should have more insight. So that's it. On that one issue, I mean, yes, I'm against Obamacare because of the way it was done and what it includes and the costs. But there's some provisions in there that, starting forward, it could absolutely be used and integrated in a good bill.
I actually work for a health center in Torrington.
Good.
Who, she has a picture of President Obama up on the wall saying that because of Obamacare being done, that we are able to service people who normally couldn't get insured. And this is community health and wellness here, right in Torrington on Midgeon Avenue. And my understanding from the CEO is that it's an amazing thing, and there's like over 8 providers that I can hear all day long. And I personally am going to ask about the IPAB to see, because I haven't heard anything bad about it at this point from where I sit in my bookkeeping office.
Yet, that's why. The IPAB has not been implemented yet. It comes in 2014. So, but no, I mean, you're correct in your statement, because people that didn't have insurance now have insurance. And again, that's a good premise of it. No one's going to dispute that. I'm not going to dispute it. I mean, again, the premise of Obamacare is great. Give more insurance to everyone, but it did nothing to address the costs. Ask your physician, about Medicare reimbursement rates. Ask your physician if it attacked or addressed rising insurance, medical malpractice insurance rates. All the big cost controls of it were not addressed. Those were ignored. Those should have been addressed in the bill.
Yeah, there's no doubt, that the government gives a great break or incentive to health centers. Let's say that, right? We can say that. But at the same time, if they, I don't know, I just feel like, I understand what you're saying, where the money isn't coming fully because they're given such a great discount. Say someone comes in as a patient, they pay $25, right?
Right.
And then the government will pick up the rest of the tab of, say, $300. But then there's still a piece of it. I believe that they get an incentive from the government to the facility, correct?
Yes.
I don't know, so many topics.
No, there are. And like I said, in an ideal world for all of us, we'd have more input from more individuals from the community, not just one party versus the other, writing bills the way they want to do them. And you would invite professionals to be a part of that discussion too. And that's how things are done in our community, in our society. I mean, you have to have a good faith effort to include everybody and solutions, not just one-sidedness.
All right, last question, John.
Yes. Something uplifting. I mean, this has all been kind of a tough.
I don't know if it'll be uplifting or not, John.
Oh, man.
I'll try. And I know this isn't supposed to be a debate. I know we're supposed to end, but
it's good practice. If I'm going to get Larson to debate me.
In my philosophy, we're at a watershed moment, November 6th. We're at a serious point in our country. We're moving away from our Constitution. We're starting to treat it as a quaint document. We're sucking out 25% of the sustenance of this country. 25% of everything we grow and produce in this nation is going to support the federal government, and it's not enough. It's not enough even to pay the entitlements, let alone the cost of airplanes and defense and the DOE, which has 24,000 employees. I think we have to decide as a nation, and I'm thrilled that you're engaged in the debate, you're thinking about these things, how much, what percentage of everything we grow and produce and take out of the ground in this country we can give to the government to support its prodigious spending habits. 30 million new people with health insurance. It's a wonderful thing for those people. It's probably the right thing for our society. Somebody has to pay for it.
Yeah, no, don't have to pay for
nobody
it.
knows
We have to
yet.
have the physicians that will handle it.
We're all going to be paying somehow, and we don't know yet how that is because it's all veiled, hidden, and postponed. So I'm glad you're thinking about it, John, and I encourage you to
Well,
keep
you know,
doing so.
again, it gets back to why I ultimately decided to run, because there are concerns I'm on, and I don't see them being addressed in the media and really with our politicians. And when I was told that I should consider running, you know, I initially just dismissed it. I was like, there's no way I can do this. You know, I'm married, I got 3 young kids, I work, my wife works, you know, I'm involved in the community, as I told you some of the organizations earlier. There's no way I can do this right now. Then I started thinking about it, like, you know, I don't want to look back in 5 years from now and say, I had a chance to try to make a difference. I had to try to chance to say, you know, what needed to be done, or at least speak up about my concerns, and I didn't do it. Because one of the things that always bothers me in society and individuals, whomever it may be, or wherever you are when people just complain. And they just sit and they complain, no matter how much something needs to be done, and they don't do anything about it. They just continue to complain. You know, if you know something's broken, needs to be fixed, step up and do it. You know, try to make a difference. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do. So this will either be the greatest thing I've ever done or the dumbest thing I've ever done. I don't know. But you know what? I'm enjoying it. I'm proud to do it. Having fun. So.
Well, I want to thank you for coming tonight, John. If anyone wants to send a question or email or anything, what would be the best way for them to get in contact?
Yeah, great. There's a lot of the information I talked about. And actually, we have a couple position papers on Obamacare and Medicare. We have a position on our energy policy, which you asked about the XL pipeline. Definitely, obviously, the economy and jobs. In fact, that's why I could recite those steps for you real quickly because it's on our website. So a lot of that's there. That's Decker2012.com. So go to Decker2012.com. You can always email, you know, Decker. It's Decker for Congress @gmail. My campaign manager's going to love that. I just gave our email address on TV. But Decker for Congress @gmail.com. And, you know, if you want to follow what we're doing, where we're going to be, you know, we're on Facebook, obviously, which is just search John Decker Congress. You can like us at John Decker Congress. And most of my, like, intraday comments are on Twitter. You know, I know some of the media are following us on Twitter. It's DeckerJH or @DeckerJH on Twitter. But, you know, one of the things I'm really trying to do, and I appreciate you letting me say this last closing remark, is I truly believe it's my responsibility to be accessible and answer these types of questions and be out there to the public, to be out there to the voters. And I want to make myself available. So, you know, email me, you know, reach out. If you see me in the district walking around, ask your questions because only, you know, the people in here that asking questions are great questions, but there are a lot of other questions out there. And just know that I'm here for you and ask me your questions and say hello. Some of you hopefully along the way too. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
John, thank you very much. I think this is a wonderful start to a series of roundtables that are really touching upon issues that are going to affect all of us in our future. So we thank you for making the trip here, and we truly appreciate your being with us.
Glad to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.